Good evening, everybody. Let's call this meeting to order at 7:10. Forgive our late arrival. We are just returning from an executive session. All members are in attendance with the exception of Mr. Golden, who was unable to join us this evening. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first item of business this evening is a report from our student representative at the Wilmington Middle School. Mia, good evening. Thank you for being here.
Hello, my name is Mia. So for leadership, on Friday, March 21st, 15 students were selected to attend a leadership conference in Danvers, Massachusetts. During this conference, students from different schools and towns throughout Massachusetts learn important and essential skills for leadership. 3 speakers arrived and talked about their story, inspiring students to step up and learn how real leaders work. One of the speakers that arrived talked about his story of becoming a magician and is a well-known speaker. The second speaker spoke about his experience at the Boston Marathon bombing on April 15, 2013, and he took action during a rough time as a leader would. The speaker talked about his experience with mental health and taught that it's okay not to be okay. For 8th grade course selections, last week high school counselors came to Wilmington Middle School to help 8th grade students pick their 8 electives for high school next year. They came in during our WIN, further known as a What I Need period, to help us show how to select our electives and answer any questions if students were curious about like a certain class. The Student Council 7th grade dance on March 20th from 5:30 to 7:30. Students in Student Council White Group were asked to help teachers maintain the 7th grade dance for St. Patrick's Day. Students that signed up were asked to help sign and check people in, as well as clean up afterwards. After cleaning up, students helped take off decorations and clean up the floors. Teachers set up the decorations prior to the start of the dance, and student council members were a big help and also got to enjoy the dance. Robotics Team, last night was their STEM fair, which was held at the Lower Explorer wing with many games and all types of attractions to keep people of all ages entertained and content. The high school had also made an appearance and demonstrated their robot that they built. During the fair was a fundraiser that sold 3D printed objects for people to purchase. With this, the robotics team was able to raise over $1,000, which will be used to help fund parts and equipment for their club in the future. For a classroom highlight is that Miss Fisher, Challenger 7, she was talking about how she does these nature walks where she takes the students outside to look at the Ipswich River, which is just behind the West Intermediate, and she just makes them take pictures, look at the pH levels of the water and temperatures. She also gives them a chance to show off their scientific documentation and makes an assignment to show what they learned over the course of the nature walk. And while on the topic of data, tomorrow, March 27th and March 28th are the dates of our last diagnostic testing. Students will take the IXL portion of the testing tomorrow during the day. The IXL will help teachers see the students' progress and understanding throughout the year by looking at their scores and their statistics on each topic that they were tested on. On Friday, students will take the iReady. The iReady is just a similar test that challenges students on their comprehension and ELA skills. On the topic of music, on March 21st, this 8th grade chorus had a guest conductor who spent 3.5 hours working on with them on songs that they had been learning since January. Ms. Pennington was the student teacher supervisor for Ms. Prnival when she was learning how to teach. They had a small concert at 1 p.m. after the master class finished, and it turned out lovely. On that note, throughout the year, band students prepare for 2 concerts. Recently, the band students had been practicing for an upcoming spring concert. The spring concert is on May 8th. And these events typically take place here in the Wilmington High School, usually in the auditorium or the gymnasium. During the last week of summer, 8th grade band students have the opportunity to attend band camp. It's a great time to learn about what is to come in high school. 7th graders that have been selected to be sub-freshmen have the chance to join as well. And lastly, for the No Place for Hate Club is a place where people are able to be themselves. Recently, the club had come up with an amazing project, the Humans of Wilmington Middle School interview series. The series is for students to share their unique experiences with the school and the Wilmington community. Students can sign up to be interviewed and to share their stories throughout April and May. Thank you.
Good job, thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Not a question, but a comment. I loved hearing about the nature walk. That does sound like a really cool way to spend some time practically dealing with science, interacting with science and whatnot. And the, do you know if the Humans of Wilmington Middle School interview series, will that be just shown within the school, or how will that be shared if we were interested to see some of those interviews and such?
During advisory, is like a period that we have like once a week on Blue Day 1. They introduce the idea of it, and they do share it on their Instagram. So like people from outside and around like the Wilmington community, they can see it on their Instagram as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for
Appreciate the
having
report.
us.
Thank you.
I don't know if Tracy told you, but you can stay if you want, but we won't be upset if you want to go home and do your homework.
Oh no, I finished all my
Awesome. All right, that brings us to the robotics team. Ms. Kim, good evening. You have some students with you?
Yes.
Does that microphone work? Because that might be easier for us to hand around.
Should. You should be live, yep.
Should.
Stand. So not only do the
I mean,
students.
we can sit. It just seems awkward to be like passing that around.
Yeah, I'm gonna let them go. I'm just gonna sit.
You're not needed here, Miss Kim.
You're not, I
Yeah. So, hi everyone. We're representatives of the Wilmington Wired Wildcats, which is the high school robotics team. My name is Evander Ragsdale. I'm a senior, and I am the strategy and business lead.
My name is Jay Karani. I'm a sophomore, and I'm on the mechanical team, and I'm the lead.
My name is Jillian Weinstein. I'm a freshman at the Wilmington High School, and I am the assistant notebook.
Okay, so the Wilmington High School Robotics Team is associated with FIRST, which stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. And it runs a bunch of different competitions every year, and we participate in the FIRST Tech Challenge, which has a game field and a series of ways to earn points, which we create a robot to earn as many points as possible. This year, when we participated in like the regional competitions, we won our second one, the Battle of Lexington, and got the Massachusetts high score for a number of points, and that allowed us to move on to states this year, which hasn't happened for the high school since 2018. 2019. Yeah, and has never happened for me personally, so that was cool. Yeah, we're also on Instagram at WHS Wildcats Robotics, if anyone's interested. Oh yeah, and as strategy and business lead, for me particularly, that means I plan out like our strategy for the game, but I also run point when it comes to communicating with the teams that we work with at the competition, because we need to put both of our robots in the same place. We need to understand how the robots work, how they interact with each other, where the strengths and weaknesses are, and that's a really good way to branch out into the community, meet new people, and just generally work the mental gears. I also run a lot of the outreach programs that we do, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later.
So, I'm a part of the mechanical team, and my main job is to put together the robot, which I'm going to bring over to you all this. So, this is what we've spent hours and hours of our lives creating. So, the main purpose of this year's game is to pick up these blocks called samples. So, our arm back here is able to flip up, and it does so using powerful servos, which spin. We can also go down, as well as angling the claw, allowing us to choose any orientation. This made us one of the best intakes in Massachusetts. I'd say this season overall, we broke a lot of records in the state. Even to this day, even though we didn't do too great at the state competition, we still hold the #1 autonomous OPR in the state, which means when our robot is moving in the autonomous period, more commonly by itself with pre-programmed instructions, our robot holds the state record and has scored the most points in the entire state. That is thanks to this. We're able to easily pick up blocks. Oops.
Do you want me to hold the mic?
Yes, please. Alright, we're good. So,
I imagine it's easier to drive with two hands.
yeah. One of the main challenges was reaching really high because the buckets that we need to score these blocks in are extremely high, and we accomplished that with these 2 slides. I'm not going to fully extend it, but just, it's taller than me. Change the light stand fully.
We just don't want to hit the ceiling.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I think overall it's been a great season. In terms of software, one of the main things we implemented this season was dead wheels, which are wheels aside from these 4 wheels. Can you hold this? Yeah.
I'm a mic holder.
These 2 wheels right here, these pretty much just perfectly track to down to like the nearest millimeter exactly where a robot is on the field, which helped us a lot. We also used actual text-based code and not blocks for the first time. It seems simple, but we never thought of it. That we also got libraries such as Pedro pathing, and this let us use Bezier lines instead of traditional straight side, for example. Let us spline to positions, letting us turn and move at the same time. And Jill, do you want to demonstrate driving?
Sure. Why'd you give me the mic?
Were especially useful in the autonomous mode where everything is pre-programmed. So we knew, or the robot knew exactly where it was on the field at all times, which was really helpful when we don't control it. And when we do control it in the driver controlled mode, we have a lot of speed, which we're not going to demonstrate because we don't want to be crashing into chairs, but a lot of speed, a lot of precision. You'll notice that we can go side to side instead of turning the entire robot. That's thanks to our mechanism wheels. And that was really helpful during the game, the extra maneuverability we get from that. We also we involved a lot of aesthetics in our robot this year. Of course, you'll notice the LED lights, the black detailing and stuff. A lot of it's 3D printed, which is pretty cool. Our entire arm and claw design was 3D printed this year, which was a lot of work to design it. Anything else to add? Okay, cool.
So my job this year was the assistant notebook. So this year I got to document the robot and our progress of our robot over the course of the season. So while this guy was building, I was writing. But it was overall, our season was amazing, and I had a blast being a freshman this year because I have been doing robotics since I was in 6th grade. So this is my 4th year in FTC. However, this is my 1st year in the high school FTC program, and I had a blast with the mentoring from my senior. So sad. But also from sophomores like Jay and Ethan, and I learned so much, but also just seeing how things worked and being able to track that progress taught me a lot in my FTC game. But some outreach that we did this year included the STEM fair, which was happening last night. I was there helping the middle school team sell 3D printed objects for a fundraiser. And we also had a course where the high school got to demonstrate their robot and like the way that we pick up blocks, intake, how our competitions went. And the middle school teams got to showcase their robots by inviting elementary school kids and people of all ages to drive them in competitions. So competitions or challenges.
Mazes.
Yeah, to move around.
The kids loved it.
Yeah, it was awesome. It's always awesome. I ran that last year, and it was a blast getting to meet all the little kids. But also, another thing we do, middle school. I was just talking about that. I was like, what did I forget? So, me, as well as many other people on the high school team, get to mentor the middle school team. And this year I got to visit them and advise them through what they had to do. And if they ever had problems, struggles, anything like that, they would always come to me or any other of the older upperclassmen, for help, which was nice because it's good to see it from a different perspective now that I'm at the high school.
And just a few more outreach things we did. We hosted an event at the library where we invited kids to come over and learn about our team, learn about robotics. There was a little bit of driving the robot, of introduction to coding basics, and we had like some old parts that they could fiddle around with, put together. And we also did that partially with a local Girl Scouts troop who we helped get their showcasing robotics badge. So me and another member on the team went over to one of their meetings to talk about robotics and stuff, and then they came with us to the library event to demonstrate what they learned, and it got them the badge, which was really cool. And the other big thing we do every year is we host summer enrichment programs for, I think we have coding, basic robotics, and CAD, and more advanced robotics. And that's open for middle schoolers, is that right? Fifth and up graders to come and learn about robotics, do that kind of summer camp, and a lot of people on the robotics team run it. It's a great introduction. It's especially great for people who want to get into robotics but don't have the experience or don't know where to start. It's a great introductory program. And yeah, I think that's about all we have for today. So, questions?
Can we applaud?
We do a lot of this type of stuff for interviews at the competition.
Very cool.
It shows. Great job.
Thank
Questions
you.
from the committee? Or comments? Praise? Dr. Bryson?
I have praise.
Yeah.
This is amazing, and it's so good to see you all. Thanks for sharing. But what are your goals for next year? Well, I know your goal might not be the same. But
My
you
goal
can share
is
your
to
goal with us.
survive my first year of college. I'm going to see what robotics opportunities they have there and see what I'm interested in joining. But for goals for next year, I'm going to give it to Jay.
I think at least from last year, we saw like a crazy step up in improvement. We went from almost near the last of every competition to being near the top of the state, which is an absolutely insane accomplishment. Next year, we plan to take that even further and maybe even make it to the World Championship. Big goals, big goals.
Aim high.
Yeah, to add to that, I definitely agree, like, making it to Worlds. It was absolutely doable this year. I think we got the short end of the stick, but I definitely think
at states. If it hadn't,
that's the purple tape, yeah. But no, it's working now, and I know we can do it, so I'm excited for that.
Mr. Turner?
One thing I wanted to say, I particularly appreciate the outreach back to the middle school, the robotics, the theater, the music, those sorts of groups at the high school, the interactions to the middle school, I think are a real strength of the district, and it's growing, and I really appreciate the mentorship you guys provide to the middle school. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for their efforts on that.
Yeah, it comes full circle. Like, I started in 6th grade at the middle school. Obviously, Jill was just there last year, and it's really great to see like how far they've come and how far they will come and do that mentorship. It's very rewarding.
That's awesome. Mr. Smaha?
It's fantastic. It's good. It's good to see. I want to say too, just to add, the outreach you guys do with the middle school. I think that is, you talk about, you guys were here last year, and then you're here this year to continue to improve. And I think having it at the middle school as well is giving kids, you guys are coming with so much more experience than some of the older students. So I think it's a fantastic program. So, and congratulations on states. That's fantastic.
Mr. Iso?
I want to also extend warm thanks to Ms. Kim and also to Mrs. King, who are the two advisors to the Robotics Club, who put in just absolutely countless hours to make this program work and give these kids the opportunity that they've had. How cool is it to build a robot from scratch, like a real robot with real individual parts, and you build it, you code it, you learn how to drive it, you develop a strategy for how you're going to collaborate with another team to score points in a game. It really is an amazing project, and at the states tournament, they broadcast it live on YouTube. And so in the early qualifying rounds before showing up in person, we were just like glued to the TV, watching these little robots going around and hanging specimens and dumping things in buckets and spinning around. And they have a commentator who's explaining what's happening. Oh, it looks like they've got a specimen stuck in their robot. How are they going to shake that out? And we're glued to it's like it's the NFL for us. We're like glued to the screen, watching these teams, watching the standings update. And so it was terribly exciting until sadly the robot broke, and they were doing so great even at the
It
state
was
tournament.
devastating. I cried.
That they were doing great until the robot broke. But the robot we'll just say one thing to work on for next year. Robot, not going to break. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
And but it's been a wonderful experience for the Ragsdales have been deep in robotics for quite a while, and it's been fantastic. So thank you all.
And going off of Mr. Ragsdale's first comment. Yeah, we really could not run this whole team without Ms. Kim and Ms. King. They're instrumental to our success, helping us order parts, staying with us at the school on some nights. It's been a lot, and their commitment and help when it comes to keeping this team active and in line a little has been so important. So great.
What's the season? So is it all year? Is it like a sports season? How does this work?
Well, the actual competitions usually start like at the end of December, beginning of January, and then states was early March, I believe. But of course, you have to build the robot before then. So for us, the season starts as soon as the game gets announced, which is usually like beginning middle September. Mm-hmm. We start building, then we go all the way through, and by the time we get to the actual competitions, we're meeting more often then. That's when the 10 p.m. nights came in. But yeah, it's really a build-up that whole time. Once the competitions are over, whether we've lost or won or whatever, we tend to peter out because actually all three of us do tennis, which is a spring sport. So we don't keep up with robotics in the spring after the competition's over. But we get ready so that we can start next year on our feet.
Thank you.
Oh, overachiever.
Jay when the season starts.
The season doesn't end.
It never ends. Never ends.
Jay's always doing something.
Others? I will just say thank you. It's well documented. This is always one of my favorite groups to come in because we have seen you guys improve and grow and succeed at a higher level. So I think it's great that you continue to do this and that you stick with it. And I mean, from the middle school on up, it's a wonderful program, and thanks to you and Ms. King as well. But you guys, you will start from scratch. This robot that you have now is not what will come here next year or to the competitions next year. I mean, you guys are quite literally doing this completely from scratch every year, which is incredible. So I think people often forget that this really is from the ground up. So thank you.
Yeah. Jay, do you want to tell them about your custom parts that you want to start doing?
I really want to know how tall the arm actually is.
Yeah, do it. No, maybe keep it on the ground.
No, it's okay.
You can change some light
You won't
bulbs,
touch the ceiling.
More about the lights.
turn on the projector.
It's the tallest reach
That's
crazy.
of
awesome.
all the robots.
That's fantastic.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's
Got
great.
hooks we can latch onto a bar and completely pull ourselves up. That was part of the game. We can put the samples in the high basket. Oh, we got that to hang specimen on the rungs. We got. Oop. That's the risk with bringing it that high up. The torque gets messed up, but.
That's great. Really?
We have to showcase it in a couple of weeks so we can.
Oh, yes.
Please don't break it on my account. I would feel terrible. But
I'm going to need
thank
someone to sign a field trip form when I get home.
Okay.
Thank
Other
you.
questions? Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
That's awesome.
Feel bad for whoever's next.
All right.
Consent agenda.
Moving to the consent agenda, we have approval of minutes, March 12th, 2025. Is there a motion? Mr. Ragsdale, second. Dr. McCaldy, all those in favor? That is unanimous. We have approval of band camp field trip, August 2025. Is there a motion? Dr. Bryson, second. Mr. Samaha, all those in favor? That is unanimous. We have approval, acceptance of the WEF grant award in the amount of $4,663.32 for the Joanne Benton Grant for Educators Exploration and miscellaneous grants. Is there a motion? Mr. Samaha, second. Mr. Turner, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, as always, to WEF for being such a great partner. We have approval of policies IKF-A and JLCD. Is there a motion? Mr. Samaha, second by Mr. Ragsdale. All those in favor? Unanimous. And we have warrants, grants 28, 29, revolving 51 through 54, local 81 through 84, food service 52 through 54, circuit breaker 20 through 22, special education 46 through 51, and payroll 3/26/2025. Is there a motion? Mr. Samaha, second. Mr. Turner, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Turner.
One quick point, sorry, going back to the WEF grant for a moment, I wanted to highlight one of the key supporters of the art fair, which is upcoming, is WEF, and one of the grants that we just approved was to support the art fair. They have been a continual strong supporter of that event, in addition to the two Ed Explorer grants, which are fantastic opportunities for individual teachers to grow their own practice. And so these particular grants are all really kind of amazing and important to the district.
Thank you. Agreed. Okay, that brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Rand.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just really quick, a comment on the robotics group before us. You know, it's impossible not to think about the through line that is built from the foundation on up at the earlier grades, even before the middle school. I was unfortunately not able to go to the STEM fair last night because we had the building committee meeting. Miss Elliott did, but my understanding is there were 400 students there in attendance, 20 staff who volunteered, and 40 middle and high school students. And I know probably all of you around this table have been to that STEM fair, but if you haven't for a while, what the energy, the excitement, and the modeling for the younger students, for not just the cool robotics that are there, but just the older students, it is little wonder why our robotics programs are exploding at the middle school and clearly at the high school. And there has to be a clear through line to the energy and excitement that's starting at those younger years. So just a shout out to all of those that were involved in that great event. 2 items tonight under the report. I'll go in order. The first, just to bring attention with this opportunity for those that are watching, we are preparing for the 6th Community Forum for the Wilmington Elementary School project on Monday, March 31st. This is in addition to the many, I think we're up to 14 or 15 since the summer, specific meetings for this project and the building committee, but this is the 6th forum. This is open to anyone who is willing to come and is interested in learning more about the project. We have the partnership of WCTV, who will be broadcasting it and obviously recording it, and it'll also be hybrid. So for those that might not be able to make it out but want to tune in, want to ask questions, there's the information on the flyer that is included in the packet and will be pushed out everywhere we can through our school principal newsletters and so on. So Monday, March the 31st, 6 o'clock, in person here at the large group instruction room at the high school, and also available to tune in remotely. So important point as that project continues to move forward. Item 6B is the school choice information, and there's a lot of information that comes with this, all of which is included in the packet, and just want to take the opportunity here to walk through this. And you are, just to start with, there's no action being requested of the committee this evening, but as a reminder, this is an actionable item that you as a school committee, you do need to act upon, and the recommendation is to do so at your next meeting. But that's not a hard and fast date. That's a recommendation. I think the key date is June 1st, if I'm not mistaken. There's a lot of information from the Department of Education. You've seen this before. We tried to not overwhelm you with the information, but there's a lot to consider with this. There's an advisory memo from the Department of Education that's included here, FAQ document from the Department of Ed on school choice, and then an overview of the school district participation for the last 2 years, this year being one of them, just as an effort to give you, as a school committee, a landscape view of the status of other districts around, and then the relevant Massachusetts general law. So again, tonight is meant to be informational and an opportunity for discussion, but leading towards the eventual vote as a committee that you have to take. But to start with, as I did in the memo, this is a topic that we've talked a little bit more extensively about, I would say, over the last few years, for a lot of, I think, very understandable reasons. For those that are not familiar with school choice, essentially it's opening our doors to non-Wilmington resident students to receive their education in our schools at the grade or grade levels that you as a committee would designate. The effort here this year, with the understanding that the interest is there to sort of more broadly consider this, is to try and provide a little bit more insight in terms of the data that we are looking at, that my office, the central office, looking at, to try and put a frame around what this could look like for the consideration going forward. So the information that accompanies this is based upon the data that we have right now, our current enrollment, and also our current staffing projections that are built into the budget that you've approved for fiscal year 26. Of course, these numbers can change, not the budgetary numbers relevant to staffing, but of course the students that we don't know who may leave our school district moving out of town, or conversely who are moving into town. We always have to be mindful, of course, as you know, of contractual class sizes. And just as a friendly reminder, at the elementary level, up to grade 4, those contractual class size ranges are to 20 to 1. Fourth grade through 8th grade is 25 to 1, and then at the high school currently it's 20 to 1. And so when we structure when we create the staffing levels, we are always mindful of those numbers. There's physical space constraints that we're also, as a district, nudging towards, not at the high school, not so much at the middle school, certainly at the elementary level. In part, that is because of a couple of factors. One, the current Wildwood situation that is, inserted a number of classrooms into the west, our continual expansion of more, some of our sub-separate program classrooms. So there's a reality to physical space that is not unlimited by any means. I would suggest to anyone who has a chance to walk through, like we do, the elementary schools were full. I mean, there's really not excess room that's available, widely speaking. The data that is there, so you see that at the elementary level, the middle school data, what we did was just sort of structure that around the current structure of the teaching teams there. And just as a reminder, there are 3 teaching teams at each grade level, and each teaching team has 4 core subject teachers. There's obviously a whole host of other teachers that help in education of the middle school students, but that to me is sort of akin to a homeroom at, say, the 2nd grade or 3rd grade. High school is a lot more complicated, but nevertheless, we tried to provide a snapshot of the data in grades 9 to 12 and working with Mr. Gendron on this. And so in the backup data, you'll see the range of what the current class sizes are. These are not projections, for what's expected or anticipated or a hunch around what may be next year, but it's based upon what the current numbers look like right now. And of course, I think that the storyline of the high school, as we've talked about a number of times here, is the retention rate continues to creep up, and every year is getting a little bit stronger in terms of the number of students that are staying with the 8th grade class and making their way across town to the high school. That's a great thing. We're obviously thrilled to see that. And then the number of students that may be, that are Wilmington students, that are starting their high school career in another high school, whether that be private, whether that be a public, i.e. a tech school, or something else, but that are making their way back to the high school. Those numbers are also, they're impossible to predict from year to year, but we're tracking those, and those numbers are also going up. So hopeful that that data is helpful to sort of paint that picture of what we're looking at. As you see in the memo, what the, I hope you don't mind, but sort of coming forth with the recommendation tonight, this evening, and I do point attention to the fact that if there's any capacity that I see from the seat that I'm in, I think there's some capacity at the middle school. Those class sizes are 25. Right now, based upon what we know and the numbers that are coming behind the current classes, I think an argument could easily be made that there is some space. And if you wanted to consider opening up school choice, I would suggest that those are the grade levels that you could consider that. The problem I see with that is when those students matriculate to the high school. And unless there's anything that changes with a swing there with the retention rate, number of students returning, or something different with that schedule. And that new schedule, of course, as you're also aware, has impacted things here at the high school. I think that becomes of concern. And just something to be thinking about. So I'll pause there. Undoubtedly, you may have questions. Lauren's here from who's working closely with Paul in our office around sort of pulling all this together, and also can assist if you have questions that I might not be able to answer.
Thank you, Dr. Byrne. Questions from the committee? Dr. McCauley.
Yeah, thank you. When I was reading through the state policy around school choice, it said that the sending district would need to pay the receiving district $5,000 in tuition, if I read that correctly.
Yes.
And I believe our per pupil costs are a lot higher than $5,000.
They are.
So is there any way the district can recuperate that cost?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Great question. So, and certainly I welcome Lauren and Paul to weigh in. That's right. The data that the Department of Education has right now is only up to fiscal year 23. And our per pupil amount, based upon all of the numbers that they gather and download or upload from the district, is 22,000 and change.
It's a little over 22,000. And
that's
that's not including out-of-district special ed, which just puts it up by around 24,000.
So $5,000. So ABC district, we open up to school choice, and ABC district has a student or students that might be coming this direction. The town, it's important to note, not the district, but the understanding is the town of Wilmington would receive funds from ABC district. And there's an increase for special education services, but I think a modest one, right, Lauren?
Yeah, it's not very specific. It says it's reimbursed at 100%, but 100% of what is the real question. So it depends on the services and everything.
But certainly a large delta between our per pupil rate and what the $5,000 rate is.
Yeah, so thank you for all that. So then, fiscally speaking, it doesn't seem like this would be great for the district, because then we would be effectively subsidizing these students coming in for school choice, right?
And certainly depending on the wild cards in terms of if either directly or indirectly the school choice results in, say, the need to add additional sections, right? Like I'm making this up, but let's just say hypothetically it was at the 4th grade level. But there happened to be a larger influx, just by happenstance, at the 4th grade over the summer. Yep. That pushed us or nudged us at a particular school. And it doesn't happen often, but it sometimes happens, and then if we also open up school choice seats, we had to, say, add a section or sections. Would that be recouped by the per pupil amount? Hard to say, but, hard to say.
Okay.
Likely not.
Yeah, so two sides to this, and I basically somewhat similar to comments to prior years. Conceptually, school choice is a very fascinating idea. The idea of exposing our children to children from other towns all sounds really good. I really do struggle that $5,000 number has been there for years, is not tied in any way to inflation. I would suggest for our state reps, if the state is actually interested in this as a concept, that number would float in some way. Because the $5,000 doesn't account for any of the inflation in the last at least 6, 7, 8 years. And I don't know exactly when that number was arrived at, but it was certainly before 2019.
Yes. Oh,
So
yes.
it is kind of a painful thing to think about for that particular reason. I mean, it's difficult to talk about this in terms of, dollars and cents per student, but practically speaking, we would be subsidizing children from another town. That's difficult because it comes at the expense to the children of our town. And that feels a little bit selfish or awkward or whatever, but that's the reality of it. And until the state is comfortable changing that number, I struggle with this as a concept.
If I could just add, one thing I should have also added at the beginning too is I think, there are certainly districts that, from my understanding, there's different reasons, no doubt, that districts pursue school choice, but for some that really are contending with drops in enrollment, school choice can be an avenue to help sustain enough students coming in to be a part of a team, to sustain a certain, cross-section of courses at the high school level. There's a real desire to offer AP, whatever it is, but there's just a lower number, and perhaps opening up choice brings in more seats that then can warrant offering those courses. Personally, and it's only me talking this, if we didn't have the change in the schedule here at the high school that's now in place, I think for me, this would be a different likely recommendation, which we talked about. We're not dropping in enrollment, we certainly have capacity compared to where the high school opened. We know that. Is it something that maybe we would think differently about? And I think, again, from only I think perhaps, but we know we have a schedule change. We know that that's created some new conditions for which the high school staff and such are contending with. And I think some of that data is borne out here. Mr. Gendron's talked about some of that previously. So,
Mr. Samaha, and then Dr. McCauley.
I think, so we've been talking about this, for a couple of years, and I think I've always been curious about how it might benefit us, and I think over the years I've kind of been more in favor of exploring it a little more, but this year, noticing the changes that are coming at the high school, looking at the numbers of the class sizes at the high school, in addition, seeing when you scroll through that list of all of the class options, like even just the number of AP classes that are offered here at the high school. I mean, it's a lot. We have a nice diversity and variety of classes. I don't actually see what the benefit to offering school choice to that would be for us as a district. I can see perhaps at the middle school, but I think because the idea, right, is if you open up a seat to sixth graders, you now have that sixth grader through 12th grade, and that could then push us into a place where we're bumping up against the class size maximums at the high school, and then that means we're going to have to hire more teachers and increase costs for a very small amount that I know, Mr. Turner, you talked about, and Dr. McCauley as well. That $5,000 is not, it's actually, we spend more, the money is not a benefit to us. So I'm not sure what the potential benefit is. So given all of this, I'm pretty much, under the understanding that I don't see how this would help us as a district.
I'll let David go and then come back.
I just want to make a similar but just slightly tangential point to what Mr. Samaha was just saying, is that that idea that if it turns out that based on increased enrollment that we need to add staff, that it's one thing to say that we need to do this because enrollment has increased in the high school through whatever combination of people moving, to retention, to all the different factors. And because we have an obligation to educate the students and of Wilmington, versus we need to do this because we have invited other people into the schools for, again, really I don't want to say no benefit, because it's not all financial, but the truth is that we're asking every year. We have to go to town meeting, we have to go to our community and the taxpayers and ask for the money that we think is necessary. And again, we're really careful to ask for what we think is only necessary and not frivolous things. And I think that's part of what we ask for, is the idea that we are doing things that is part of our obligation to the town of Wilmington and its students, and not necessarily beyond that.
Thank you. I'm going to just try to quickly steer us in maybe a slightly different direction. I think all great points, topics of conversation. But I would draw us back to the fact that at our next meeting, we are tentatively scheduled to have both the public hearing and then the vote. So I would suggest at this point, perhaps, if there's information that the committee, I can sort of sense a trend from the comments, but if there's information that would be helpful in making a determination past what Dr. Brand and the team have already provided, I think that might be what we're sort of looking for right now. And then, we'll have to have this discussion in a public meeting anyways. So, all points well taken, certainly, and I think the information you guys have provided already is helpful and probably maybe not more than we've seen in the past, but more detailed than what we've looked at for some other votes. But is there anything else that folks in the committee feel would be beneficial in making a decision, or are we comfortable with what's been provided? Dr. McCauley.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to follow up on something Dr. Brand said a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Trying to better understand when it makes sense for a district to accept school choice from more of a getting students physically in a building perspective. So that would be where you're at maybe a population where you're having trouble keeping the lights on in the facility potentially, where you need to have a certain level set amount of teachers and staff in a building to keep it functional, but you just don't have that many students in there to justify it. Then that's when you need school choice. Could make sense, right, to build up that population without adding staff and administration on top of that, right? Okay, thank you.
Can I give a quick example? There's a district I'm aware of that has a middle school that runs with 2.5 teacher sets, and they have, in that particular cohort, they have a teacher who's responsible for English and history, social studies, and math and science, and so they have to have really unique teachers available. And so instead of running the kind of 3-house model we have, they do 2.5. And so that could be where you get to the point of, do you want to go down to 2.5, which is a little awkward, can work, but a little awkward, or would you want to open it up to school choice to be able to keep 3 and maintain the model pending potential changes in your own district population?
Yeah, certainly, that's a great example. In middle school, you can take a look back to see what's coming, the years ahead, and if you've got similar sort of profiles of those grade levels or classes, and then you're looking ahead to the high school to say, but we could accommodate this, that's a great example where opening up choice might be actually very helpful to round out the program or the experience for students and staff. So,
thank you. Anything else? So tentatively, we'll bring this back at our next meeting, and then we'll set the agenda later this week. So
great.
Very good. Thank you. All right. With the superintendent's report ending, that brings us to public comment. We did receive several comments in advance of the meeting, which are in the packet. I see no members of the public here, so that will conclude public comment and bring us to new business, first item of which is the Student Opportunities Act with Ms. Elliott.
Good evening.
Good evening.
In your packet tonight, there are 2 documents related to this. One is just a memo with a summary and an update, and the other is the full annual update for our Student Opportunity Act plan. So as you may recall, last spring I was here this time of year presenting to you the draft of the 3-year plan that we developed. Districts are responsible for developing a plan every 3 years and then providing an annual update. So the plan we established last year was approved in April and then implemented at the start of the school year. So we're about 7-8 months into the implementation of it. So the goal of this plan is to really identify particular student subgroups that there are disparities between how they are performing in relation to the population of students overall. So in our plan, we identified students with disabilities, low-income students, and multilingual learners as our groups that were our subgroups. And each plan has to have some priority area focuses. So we had two. One was the performance of low-income and students with disabilities on MCAS, and the second was the attainment levels for our multilingual learners. And we use the access test as our formal assessment to measure their attainment levels. So districts are required to implement evidence-based programs to really address these disparities and try to close that gap. Our focus, we had to come up with projected steps and action steps over the 3 years, but for this first year, the focus was really implementing our new literacy program for grades K through 5, providing the professional development related to that, but also professional development related to specialized reading instruction for our students with disabilities. So we've been working with Landmark at the elementary level, but we've had Landmark at the secondary level in prior years. But we're also strategically sending cohorts of teachers through Wilson training, getting them certified so that we have that capacity for our students who have that in that type of program needed in their plans to have that continuation of services. And we've really focused also on implementing, particularly at the high school, where we really didn't have a structure to our MTSS model here at the high school as solidified as we wanted, so that's been a focus here, but also just enhancing the MTSS model at grades K through 8 that had already been implemented. So the tricky part about our plan is that it requires us to use, well, the way it's written is that it's we're using MCAS and Access to really measure the growth of these students, but our students are have recently completed the Access testing and are currently, depending on the grade level, sitting for MCAS right now. So we don't have the formal data yet to really look at from last year to this year. But we will soon, hopefully. But I would say that our our own internal progress monitoring over the last several months has shown, some gains and positive results and promising results. The implementation of the literacy program definitely has been a positive one, and we're seeing lots of great things happening. Students are truly engaged. We're seeing a lot of great conversation between and among teachers at different grade spans, different grade levels, and that vertical articulation is huge. I think what's this doesn't often happen, but what's exciting is many of the intermediate grade teachers are saying, I can't wait to see my kids' MCAS scores this year, just because the focus on this program really has a lot of emphasis on students reading and responding and writing to text, and that was something we lacked immensely, I think, in our last program, in our curriculum. The amount of time that they're really doing written response to different text passages is increased significantly. So we're excited about that. We have done a lot of work this year, and we've focused on a lot of work related to assessing and addressing concerns that we saw within our program for our multilingual learners. As I've brought to this committee before, and we talked about, the population is increasing for the number of students requiring services, and we've added staff over the last year to address that, and it is a bit of a moving target, and that we keep, as soon as we feel like we're getting to a good place with staffing, our enrollment increases again. So that's been something that we're watching closely, but we've done a lot of work this year as well, training staff and really maximizing the ability for people to quickly provide translation and interpretation services on a regular basis. It was a more centralized approach for us before when we had a smaller population of students where we had particular people working on those things, but now it's much more pervasive across the district, so we really needed to decentralize that process. So we've done an extensive training this year for all of our teachers and staff, all of our staff in the buildings, to really understand their responsibility around translating documents and interpreting for families. And that's really just bridged the gap immensely, I believe, with the parents and guardians of our students who are multilingual learners, and knowing that we have that collaboration and that communication with those parents really helps support the students' overall success. So we're seeing positive trends, and we're moving through with the implementation of the plan as written. Our internal assessments that you heard from the middle school presentation tomorrow, the middle school will be, or this tomorrow, and then later on this week, they'll be participating in the IXL and iReady universal screening again. Right now, for most grades, we've done 2 universal screening periods, the fall and winter. The middle school moves their third one up because the amount of testing that they do all spring becomes a lot. So this will be their third cycle of our third data point for the middle school. That'll be coming up soon. But at this point, we have those 2 data points that are our own internal, aside from individual progress monitoring for certain students. But I'm looking forward to having that third data point, and in addition to the MCAS and the access data to help us really look at that data to see if we are. I know students are making growth. I see growth all the time. The question is, are we closing that gap with those subgroups? And that's a little too early for us to really make any, draw any conclusions from the limited data we have. But we're working hard at it and hoping that next year when I come back to present results, that I'll be able to really share more concrete data with you at that point about that pattern and the growth and what we're seeing. And I'll be bringing back, next year, the updates around the specific steps that we take each year with the 3-year plan. Happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Questions? Don't all jump at once. Dr. McCaldy.
Sure. All right. So thanks for giving the update. I found the memo kind of nice to read and everything. Gave a really good overview of like all the new things that have been implemented here, because we've seen so many presentations. So I have a few questions, but my first one is that, and you kind of just talked about it, some early improvements in internal data with the students, like the IXL and iReady, for example. I was wondering if it's a little premature to share some of this data with the committee at all. I know you just started these changes, but you're talking about, hey, we're seeing a little bit of growth here. This is a good sign. Or can it be shared just to see the magnitude of the progress that you're seeing so far?
Yeah, so I wouldn't feel comfortable yet with, until we have a full year's worth of data. So we have the 2 data points right now, and so it's really hard to draw any conclusions from that. But I anticipate once we finish this 3rd cycle of universal screening with DIBBLES and IXL and iReady. So DIBBLES and the MSDA is for our K-5 students, and then IXL and iReady we use for 6 to 8. So I can certainly compile that data for you to look at the overall performance of our students, as well as if I can glean any information about our subgroups at that point. So we certainly can do that. I could prepare something for the end of the school year or at the start of the school year, whichever you might prefer, to really kind of highlight how we ended the year and the progress that was made before we launch into the new year. So I'd be happy to share that in any way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
So 2 things. First of all, thank you. I agree completely with Dr. Mercaldi about the presentation itself. We had talked when we rolled out the K through 5 literacy about 6th grade, and you want to give an update on where we are with thinking about 6th grade literacy program, because you
Sure.
said the teachers are super enthusiastic and excited about the progress, particularly in 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
How's that? Yeah.
So Mia Parviainen, our ELA CTL, has been meeting with the sixth grade team specifically to talk about where they are with curriculum, and she will be formally launching, we'll be partnering together next year to formally launch a committee that will start to do a review of the sixth grade. It'll be a 6 to 8 grade program review of ELA. One of the parts of this plan was to really look at that sixth grade and look at that transition between fifth grade and sixth grade. And, we were recognizing, particularly at the onset or following the pandemic, that our students were coming up with significant gaps, and was the curriculum meeting the needs of those learners. So have we adapted the instruction and the curriculum enough to really match where those students were? We implemented the MTSS model with really targeted intervention, and the WIN block, and all of those things are effective. I think it's just worthy of our, it's our due diligence to really evaluate what we're doing, and it's part of our review cycle. We're actually evaluating math and ELA next year, so Mary Beth Faluk will facilitate a similar process for the math department at the middle school as well. So it'll be an analysis year. We'll be looking at everything, making some decisions. I think that my conversations with Ms. Parviainen is that she would like to, she's doing a lot of the pre-work right now, and that she would like to be able to move, maybe not spend the entire year on analysis, but really compact it and make a decision come January or February. Do we want to consider piloting new materials? Do we feel that what we have just needs some additional support or resources or revision? So we'll be making, the committee will be making those decisions going forward, but they will be looking at, the sixth grade team and the middle school is aware that we have adopted this new program, so they might be looking at other resources like this program. It does have a companion program. We're using Into Reading for K-5 and Into Literature is the 6 to 8 component of it, but they'll do a full evaluation of what resources are available and make a decision, make a recommendation.
Thank you very much. And one follow-up one, going back to the translation services and having that be at the teacher level, I think is fantastic. And I'm really happy, as I understand it, that the tool you're using shows the teacher in the foreign language so they can then retranslate it to double check that it's been translated properly. I've heard some horror stories of districts that use translation services where you enter it in English and you never see what is put into the foreign language. And I've heard that coming back, you can tell from the responses of parents that what got translated in their language was not what you meant.
Yeah, it's, we had, Colleen Billings, our ESL curriculum team leader, in her training, really was thoughtful about making sure people understood that, and she would show us, if you used a simple tool like a Google Translate, you need to translate it both ways. Translate it, and then translate it back and see what you get, and does it say what you want it to say? But part of our training is really changing what we're writing, thinking about acronyms, not using acronyms, trying to, because they will not necessarily, translate appropriately. So for quick communication, she has taught us a lot of strategies and resources and tools to use. However, for more formal documents, and we do use Lexmark. We own a Lexmark machine now that we're able to use to help us with doing translations quickly and economically. For specific things like IEPs, we use live translators to translate those documents, services, and we partner with, we've contract with Lexikeet company to do the interpretations. So we've done a lot of work on that, and you'll be hearing more too. We just completed our tiered focus monitoring review for our English ESL department, and we finished all of those steps, so I'll be bringing that to you at a future meeting to talk about what we did this year. So that really coincided, that work that we did for that tiered focus monitoring process coincided with this plan as well, so made sense.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thanks for this mid-report. It's always a little bit weird when you're in an interim period and you just think, well, things look promising, but we have to wait for the data and get further results. But this is, I think, again, like the progress looks like it's on track, and in a good place. And I think of this last point that you were just talking about, sort of about the accuracy of the translations and so forth. I think that part of the benefit, I think, of having to do that is it really makes you think about the core of what you're trying to say in the first place. This kind of goes to what you're saying about the acronyms and jargon and so forth, that it really kind of makes you focus on what is the information that needs to be conveyed, and how do we simplify that? How do we get to the core? How do we eliminate the extraneous and just focus on what's most important, so that we have less concern about whether it's like exactly translated in like the most elegant, prose in the other language. And I think that's something that when you start thinking about that, like trying to write something as clear and simple that it almost can't be mistranslated, then I think that also, even for the stuff that's not being translated, that's going to make those other communications better.
Absolutely. We've done a lot of work with our forms, really looking at forms and what fields people need to enter, and, writing date of birth instead of DOB and things like that, just things that you don't normally think of, but trying to make those forms consistent and easy to be understood and translated in various languages. And I would add that Colleen hosts events for our multilingual families to come, and she brings documents and she asks them, would you please tell me how this translation looks to you? Which has been great, because when we first bought the Lexmark machine, we were trusting that it was really good, but certain languages are really difficult, and so we did ask multiple families, and they said, this is actually really good. This is probably one of the best I've seen in translation, so as resources. So I feel like we're definitely on the right track there.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Elliott.
You're welcome.
That brings us to first read of policy IJM, special interest materials selection and adoption. So you'll see in the packet this policy with a small grammatical change. This, guys, keep me honest, correct me if I'm wrong. We discussed this policy is not an MASC policy, so this is a Wilmington Public Schools specific policy that likely doesn't get utilized all that often, but in the interest that it's needed is probably good to have. So, does that sound right?
Sounds accurate. Thank you.
All right. Questions, comments? Dr. McCauley.
Yeah, I have a few questions on this. I was wondering if any examples of these materials could be shared. So I've read just more in the news about some things with these kind of special materials that could be sponsored by certain, companies or other groups or anything like that, and there could be hidden messages in them, right? Mm-hmm. So if there is maybe limited oversight or tracking, that the messages in these materials may not be aligned with what the district is trying to teach the students. So just wondering in this policy if we can add any further mechanism where the materials can be vetted so they align with the district's curriculum.
Yes, I think when we discussed, we weren't aware of or familiar with any specific examples of materials that we had on hand.
Yeah, since I've been here, I don't know of any, but I guess, so the only thing that was coming to mind is, most of the things that I think about are not really curricular materials that might be like donated or things like that, but for example, if an author came and was doing a demonstration and then, left samples of books or things
Sure.
like that, maybe those would be, considered materials that would be added to classroom libraries that if they were donated or something along that line, but I can't really think of other concrete examples of that.
Well, we didn't really have any. In fact, the other thing that we're considering is whether we should remove this policy. Mm-hmm. So it was more about like, do we even need this? We're not using any materials really like this in our classes. But then after a while, we just said that like, well, it doesn't mean that we never will. And so it seems probably just a safer thing to hold on to this policy and sort of have something that is the sort of the official district's policy for these types of situations, rather than to delete it entirely.
Yep. That said, I think we probably could look at some kind of mechanism for reviewing those materials. I think that might make sense. So, Mr. Turner?
Is there a connection from this? Because I'm dumb, maybe not the best way to phrase this question, but do teachers know we have this policy?
Exactly what I said.
And so if they don't know we have this policy, how do we communicate to them that they shouldn't bring in special interest materials without having it be reviewed by the, certified staff member who recommends its use? So how do we connect this to actual practice to get the benefit of the policy if we want to keep the policy?
I think that was sort of part B of the conversation, kind of get this policy to the point where it's updated and then cascade that information to the building leaders and then to the classroom teachers. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
If I could,
please.
So one thing we do, we have a readiness meeting at the start of every school year, and we put documentation together that part of that includes all revised or updated school committee policies, and that's given to the principals to share with staff. Now, whether everything happens, because there's not a lot of time, but it is one way we push out any revised or new policies during our readiness meeting.
And sort of building on top of that, there are also policies that we're working on now that are related specifically to like library materials and those types of things. So this one is sort of not an outlier, but just a little bit different. So
it's a little strange to see it in isolation because because we were, as part of discussing this policy, we were also discussing the textbook selection and adoption and curricular development and so forth. So there's a whole bunch of other policies that kind of in conjunction make more sense when you sort of see them all together.
Yeah. Mr. Sma.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit curious. I think it's good to have this policy in here in general, but I'm also, I mean, is this, so for example, like the New York Times has, an education section where they have a set of questions and different things. Like, does that fall into this policy? Because that's probably not in a curriculum per se, but, I guess that would be my question. I know, for example, more science stuff, if you're talking about like, I was just looking at this the other day, don't ask me why, but carbon capture and like National Grid has this whole set of stuff on what that means, but like that's probably going to have some bias in there. Are those the types of things that we're talking about with this policy?
Yeah, I mean,
I guess that's my question: is what exactly is this? Is in here? I think it's really good to have it, but I think in some ways we need to define it. I think if an author comes in and has like physical books, like that seems a little more obvious than teachers who might be, like trying to supplement the curriculum with some things that they found, and they're like, oh, here's a good thing on carbon capture. Let me just, let me use that. I don't know. So I'm just asking the question.
As a practical example, I understand CNN 10 is used in certain parts of the middle school as a part of the social studies curriculum, a good way to keep children up to date with current events and things like that. CNN 10 is a private company, so it would conceptually have some of the things in terms of advertisements, in terms of other things like that would go along with it. I don't know. They may package it without, because it may be packaged that way intentionally for schools. But that type of thing, I think, falls in line exactly with what you're talking about, Mr. Samaha.
Dr. Bryson.
I beat you to it, David. Well, now, I mean,
no, he's already had a turn. That's
we had pieces of this conversation in our meeting, and so it's good to hear that we're all kind of on the same page. I'm also thinking about media and online sources. Like I think we're thinking of like hard copies of like pamphlets or something.
Yeah.
Which we don't see as much, right? But I mean, I don't know if we have any idea, sort of like online space, what we're using for references or this or that. So I think there's a lot of interesting places for this to go. And we asked the same question, like, do people know that this is out there, and are we doing this? And it was kind of like, well, we don't really think so. So.
Mr. Exon.
I'm just going to say that I think that I think that something like the New York Times or like a media source wouldn't really, I think that's not what this is about. I think this is about if there's some kind of publication from, the Sierra Club or, the Chamber of Commerce, like groups that are advocacy groups in that sense of like special interest. Obviously, any group can have a point of view. I'm sure anyone could complain that Hutton Mifflin has like I don't like these textbooks, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's just the idea that publications from groups that are kind of by their purpose and definition advocating for a particular point of view, and that the materials need to be appropriate and there needs to be proper disclosure.
When I first read the policy, my first thought was similarly like a group like the trustees of reservations, where like a field trip may go to Ipswich River Park, and the pamphlets there are clearly going to be geared towards their mission and what they're doing, and so does that fall under this? So if I'm hearing the group correctly, I think we probably need to, A, sort of better define what special interest materials are, and sort of develop or improve the mechanism for approving these things. Yes? Ms. Elliott and then Mr. Turner?
I would just suggest, I agree wholeheartedly, but I would also suggest that it ties to the policy around how we are choosing curriculum in the first place, and that it should include the process we go through to ensure that it's free of bias, and so there needs to be some connection there, I think, to our general process.
I think that makes sense. Thank you. Mr. Turner?
I was just going to add the only thing to your comment about, better define and then the mechanism. I think the better define makes sense. I think the mechanism isn't a policy topic. That's more of the how, not the what. Fair. When I think about policies. So the how we would defer to the central office leadership team and how they would implement the policy.
And one final comment for me is that this is another area where, like, as we, in general, going through policy, having been on the policy committee for a long time, that you're both trying to kind of tighten the policies and make sure that the policies are what we want, but also trying to make sure that they match our practice.
Right.
And so in a lot of the times when you're evaluating the policy, the first question is like, are we actually doing this? Are we even following this policy at all? And if not, then what needs to change? It's like, is it the policy that should be adopted so that it matches what we're actually doing because we think what we're doing is good? Or is it what we're doing that is not living up to the policy that we really think should be the North Star of that? So some of that comes down to this too. It's just like one way or the other, the policy and the practice should be consistent.
Agreed. Sorry. So we will send this one back to the policy subcommittee. Good? Yes. Good. Okay, that concludes new business and brings us to old business, the superintendent interim search update. I will defer to Dr. Bryson.
Sure. So it's moving along. Well, I'll just say, the screening committee met this week. They will screen candidates next week, and then I'll work with Andrea and NESDEC to figure out the dates for interviews with all of us, which will be a little tricky, I think, but we're trying to get it in before the April vacation. So it will either be the week of April 7th.
The week of the next meeting.
Yeah, so we have some work, we have some thinking to do around, if it were possible, could we do some on the 9th? And then I think the 10th wasn't going to work for everybody. So then I started to think maybe we'll move to the following week. So we've got a little bit of ironing out to do, but it will be happening by the 17th. So we will make sure that we work with everyone's calendar and just kind of know that we should have some dates to you within the next couple of days to hold.
For interviews?
Those will be for interviews in public. Those are in public, but they'll do a day in the district. So Andrea's working on some of that.
Yeah. And it is likely that we will need 2 nights to conduct these interviews.
So those interviews are typically about 90 minutes.
Right.
So we've talked a little bit about doing maybe a tad less than that.
Okay.
But it's still a pretty substantial, and so I don't think we could probably do 2 in one evening. Yeah. But to do 3 could be tricky. So there was a little talk of, could we do a day where we just do them kind of back to back? And Mr. Smaha, we didn't know if that was possible for you. So we kind of said, well, maybe that is an ideal. And so we thought to do 2 and then 1. in which case we'd need 2 evenings. And we want to try and do them close. Like, I don't think it would be wise to do some next week and then wait the week. Like, want to try and keep it as connected as possible so that we can then deliberate and then release, and that these names aren't kind of floating around out there.
And part of the logic of doing 2 and then 1 is then there's enough time after the 1 to have for the deliberation. So basically, they would be about the same length in total, but that would facilitate the conversation on that second night.
Makes sense. Mr. Ragsdale?
Is that a target of having like 3 final candidates, or,
That's
I mean,
our
what if we have like 4 good candidates, then we should interview
Right.
4 good candidates and make sure that the tail's not wagging the dog, that we interview the people that we want to interview.
We're not suggesting we limit ourselves, but 3 is sort of the target.
3 is sort of the, yeah, so 3 to 4. I mean, that was kind of, when we talked to the screening committee, that's kind of we're looking to screen and then send sort of our top 3. But yeah, if there were top 4, then sure.
For sure.
Thank you to you and Andrea and the committee for the work. I'm sure there's been quite a bit over the last couple of days, so thank you.
It's good work, yeah.
Appreciate it.
One quick thing, I do want to say, even, because we're going to say it again, but there are some fantastic parent volunteers, some fantastic volunteers from the staff, central office. It's a very good working group, and they're being really, really diligent and thoughtful about this, and it's really appreciated.
Thank you to them. Okay, that concludes old business and brings us to subcommittee reports. We've had a few. Are there any others? Hearing none. Correspondence?
None this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Future school committee dates and other notable items. On March 31st, 2025, we'll have the Wildwood Elementary School Building Project Community Forum at 6 p.m. here in this room, also offered hybrid for folks who can't be here. And on that same night, the Wildwood School Building Committee will meet at 7 p.m. following the community forum. April 3rd, 4th, and 5th, the Wilmington High School Lamplighters present Hadestown Teen Edition. Showtimes vary. Tickets can be bought on the district's website, I think,
Yeah,
right?
there's a link.
Yes, there's a link.
Thank you,
And there's a
Tracy.
link on the calendar.
April 9th is our next regular school committee meeting at 7 p.m. here in this room. April 15th, the Wildwood School Building Committee meets at 6:30. April 18th is no school. February 21st, schools and offices are closed in observation of Patriots' Day. That starts off April vacation week from the 22nd to the 25th. And on April 26th, the 2025 local town elections. Polling locations are the Senior Center and Town Hall. With that, did we miss anything?
Jazz Band, April 10th, 7 to 9 here in the Joanne Benton Auditorium.
Jazz Band, April 9th.
Nope, excuse me, 10th, sorry.
April 10th at
from
7
to 9.
in the auditorium. Yep. Very good. All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Ragsdale, second. Mr. Samaha, all those in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.